Understanding the traits of a child raised by a narcissist, the silent war growing up in a battlefield of emotions. They say home is where the heart is. But for a child raised by a narcissist, home is often a battlefield. Not the kind with explosions and gunfire, but one far more silent and far more sinister. It's emotional warfare. It's psychological landmines buried in every conversation, every glance, every moment you dared to be yourself. As a child, you didn't get to relax, you didn't get to just be. You were constantly scanning the environment, reading the room, trying to figure out who was walking in the door today. The cold narcissist, the angry one, the charming manipulator. You weren't living, you were surviving. Every single moment was a test you didn't sign up for. You weren't given affection without conditions. You were given affection as a reward, or worse, as a bait. You were taught that love had strings attached, that praise only came when you performed, so you became a chameleon. You shifted, changed, adapted, because that's what it took to avoid the wrath. The child of a narcissist often becomes hyper, aware of others' needs, but utterly disconnected from their own. Why? Because the only way to avoid pain was to anticipate it. You learned how to read expressions, tone shifts, the slight edge in a voice, the delayed text message. You became an emotional radar, but in the process, you lost yourself. Let's talk about trust. How do you learn to trust when your own reality was constantly invalidated? You said you were hurt. They said you were overreacting. You said you were scared. They laughed at you. You expressed joy, and they stole it. Eventually, you stopped sharing anything. You bottled it up, because that's what you had to do to stay safe. And here's the tragedy. You grew up believing that chaos was normal. That walking on eggshells was love. That manipulation was communication. So when you entered adult relationships, your radar was still on, still scanning for danger, still mistaking red flags for passion. Because that's all you knew. But hear me when I say this. Your nervous system isn't broken. It's been trained. You're not too sensitive. You're a survivor. You had to grow up fast. You had to mature emotionally while still trying to be a child. And now it's time to acknowledge what that did to you without shame, but with clarity. The first step to healing is recognizing you weren't crazy. You were conditioned to minimize yourself, conditioned to tolerate abuse, conditioned to believe that love hurts. But love doesn't hurt. Manipulation does. Control does. Emotional neglect does. What you experienced wasn't love. It was trauma dressed in a parent's skin. That trauma doesn't just disappear. It follows you into adulthood. It shows up in your people pleasing, in your fear of conflict, in your deep need to be perfect so you don't get in trouble anymore, in your inability to rest without guilt. And if you're not careful, it becomes your identity instead of your history. But here's the truth that will change everything. You are not broken. You were bruised. You were bent. You were burdened with a role that was never yours. But inside that pain, there's power. Power to rewire. Power to redefine. Power to reclaim every part of yourself that was stolen. You are not the result of your upbringing. You are the revolution. You don't have to continue the patterns. You don't have to pass down the pain. You get to become the person you never had growing up. The nurturer, the protector, the truth teller, the safe space. The child in you may have been helpless, but the adult in you is not. You get to choose now. You get to say no. You get to walk away. You get to draw boundaries. You get to decide that you matter. Without condition, without performance, without apology. The war may have started in childhood, but it doesn't have to define your adulthood. You're not in that house anymore. You're not under that roof. You're not that scared little kid anymore. You are strong. You are aware. And you are allowed to build peace after chaos. And let's not forget, the scars you carry are proof that you survived what tried to destroy you. They are not signs of weakness. They are signs of power. You didn't just get through it. You grew through it, and now the world better watch out, because the survivor is awake. You can't heal what you don't name. But now that you've named it, The silent war, the emotional battlefield. It's time to fight back. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with power, with peace, with presence. You're not the victim of your story. You're the one holding the pen now. The mirror was broken identity theft from day one. When a child is born, they come into this world with a unique fingerprint, not just on their hands, but on their soul. They're meant to discover who they are, to unfold into that authentic self like a flower in the sunlight. But when a narcissist is the parent, that process never gets to happen, because the moment you start showing signs of independence, of identity, of uniqueness, they crush it. They don't want a child, they want a reflection. And so the identity theft begins. It doesn't happen with one dramatic moment. It's subtle, it's slow, it's 1,000 tiny messages that say, who you are isn't good enough. Be more like this. Stop doing that. Why can't you be more like them? You're constantly being edited, erased, reshaped. You're not a child being nurtured. You're a canvas being painted to match their fantasy. What you think, what you feel, what you want. None of it matters unless it aligns with what they demand. If you're loud, you're told to be quiet. If you're quiet, you're told to speak up. If you show anger, you're punished. If you show sadness, you're mocked. Eventually, you stop expressing anything at all. You become what they need you to be, not who you really are. And here's the insidious part. This doesn't look like abuse from the outside. They might even seem like loving, involved parents. But behind closed doors, it's all about control. It's about domination. It's about molding you into their idea of perfection. Not out of love, but out of ego. Your life becomes a mirror they use to admire themselves. And if that mirror ever reflects something they don't like, they shatter it. You start to believe their voice is your voice. You internalize their criticisms as truth. You carry their shame like it's your own. You lose touch with your own desires, your own preferences, your own instincts. When someone asks you, what do you want? You freeze, because no one ever asked you that before and meant it. You were trained to think about what they wanted first. By the time you're an adult, you might look like you've got it all together. But inside, you feel hollow. You wear masks in every room. You become the fixer, the pleaser, the overachiever, because deep down you're still trying to earn approval, still trying to be enough, still running the program they installed in you a long time ago. But let me tell you something. They don't own you anymore. The mirror they broke, it's still inside you. It's cracked, maybe, it's dusty, but it's there, and it's waiting for you to clean it off and finally see yourself. Not the version of you that made them comfortable, not the version of you that made them proud, but the real you, the messy, radiant, rebellious, beautiful version of you that they tried to silence. You don't have to live as a replica. You are not an echo. You are not a projection of someone else's unmet needs. You are original. You are divine. And every day you wake up and choose to be honest about who you are. You reclaim a piece of that stolen identity. Every truth you speak, every boundary you set, every part of yourself you embrace, that's you taking your life back. Reclaiming your identity isn't easy, it's terrifying. It means facing the fear of being rejected, the guilt of saying no, the grief of lost time. It means sitting in the discomfort of not knowing who you are, and slowly, painfully rediscovering it. But I promise you, on the other side of that pain is power, real power, the kind that can't be taken away again. This journey isn't about blaming. It's about naming. Naming what was stolen. Naming what was suppressed. Naming what was always yours, but got buried beneath layers of conditioning. And once you name it, you get to choose it. You get to create it. You get to live it. Not out of rebellion, but out of freedom. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were just too real for someone who needed you to be fake so they could feel okay. But you're not here to be someone else's mirror. You're here to shine, to speak, to feel, to take up space like you were always meant to. They tried to erase you, but they failed, because you're still here. You're breathing, You're growing, and now you're remembering that you have a voice, that you have a purpose, that you have a life that belongs to you, and no one, not even the person who raised you, has the right to define that. So take the broken pieces, take the shame, take the confusion, and use it. Use it to rebuild, use it to rediscover. Use it to remind yourself that your identity isn't something they gave you. It's something you create. Not once, every day, every moment, with every choice you make to be you. This is the revolution, not loud, not flashy, but deep, quiet, soul-level transformation, and it starts the moment you stop looking in their mirror and start looking in your own. The curse of over-empathy, feeling everyone, forgetting yourself. If you were raised by a narcissist, you were taught, without words, that your emotions were too much, your needs were inconvenient, and your pain was an interruption to their performance. So what did you do? You turned the volume down on yourself and up on everybody else. You started to raid their moods before your feet even hit the ground. You became an emotional sponge, soaking up everyone else's feelings until there was no room left for your own. It didn't start with kindness. It started with fear. You had to become hyper, aware of everyone else's state of mind to survive. Were they in a good mood? Could you breathe? Were they irritated? Time to disappear. That wasn't compassion. It was survival. And over time, survival looked like empathy, but not the healthy kind. The kind that made you abandon yourself to keep the peace. This kind of over-empathy is dangerous. It looks like kindness, but it's a prison. It means you say yes when your soul is screaming no. It means you take care of people who never show up for you. It means you feel guilty for putting yourself first, even when your tank is running on fumes. Because somewhere deep down you were conditioned to believe your value came from being useful, not from being whole. Over-empathy makes you feel responsible for things that were never your burden. Your friend is upset. You drop everything. Your partner is distant. You blame yourself. Your coworker is stressed. You absorb it. Why? Because that old programming says if they're okay, maybe I'll be okay. But that's a lie. Your safety can't be outsourced. Your peace can't depend on other people's approval. Let's talk about guilt. The weapon narcissists use like a scalpel. They made you feel guilty for having boundaries. Guilty for speaking up. Guilty for needing space. So now, even as an adult, setting boundaries feels like betrayal. Saying no feels like cruelty, but it's not. Boundaries are not walls, they're doors with locks. And you get to decide who enters. Here's the paradox. People who are over-empathetic often attract those who are under-empathetic. The narcissist, the taker, the emotional black hole. Why? Because they see your kindness as a weakness to exploit. But what they didn't count on was you waking up, you realizing that empathy without boundaries is self-destruction in disguise. You are allowed to say, "This is not mine to carry." You are allowed to walk away from chaos. You are allowed to feel your own feelings without needing to fix everyone else's first. That's not selfish, that's sacred. That's reclaiming your emotional freedom, because you don't owe anyone your peace. You don't have to sacrifice your well-being for someone else's comfort anymore. Some of you don't even know what you feel until someone else tells you how they feel. That's not intuition, that's conditioning. You were trained to be a mirror, but now it's time to be a window to your own soul, your own truth, your own damn needs, and that starts with asking the question you were never allowed to ask. What do I need right now? This journey is brutal at first. You'll feel guilty for things that aren't wrong. You'll feel selfish for choosing yourself. You'll feel resistance from people who benefited from your silence. But that's the price of liberation. That's the fire you walk through to get to the life that's finally yours. And when you start to reclaim that life, something powerful happens. Your empathy doesn't disappear, it evolves. It becomes sacred, selective, wise, no longer given to everyone who demands it, but offered to those who earn it. You go from being a sponge to being a lighthouse. You shine, but you don't absorb. You guide, but you don't sink. You have the right to exist as more than a caretaker, more than a fixer, more than an emotional dumping ground. You are not put on this earth to regulate everyone else's nervous system while yours burns in silence. Your life is not a rescue mission. It's a reclamation. This is how you break the curse. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop trying to be everything for everyone, and finally start being everything for yourself. That's not abandonment of others. That's alignment with yourself. That's how you stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even give you a band-aid. You are not too much. You are not cold. You are not broken because you finally said no more. You're awakening, you're reclaiming, you're remembering who you were before you were trained to forget. And that version of you, that's the real you, the powerful you, the free you. You were born with empathy, but now it's time to pair it with wisdom. Now it's time to choose you. The constant performer chasing worth in a world that never claps. Imagine being a child and learning that love is not something you're given. It's something you earn, not by existing, not by being, but by performing. That's the silent contract a narcissistic parent writes on your heart. You can be loved, but only if you impress me. And from that moment on, you're no longer a child, you're an actor, a performer on a stage you never chose. You learned early that your worth was tied to achievement, good grades, good manners, good behavior. You became addicted to applause, because applause meant approval, and approval felt like love. But here's the tragedy. No matter how hard you tried, no matter how much you did, it was never enough. Because narcissists move the goalposts every time you get close. You became the overachiever, the perfectionist, the golden child. Or maybe you were the peacemaker, constantly smoothing over conflict, trying to keep the emotional landmines from exploding. Either way, you learned to perform, and in that performance, you lost your authenticity. You stopped asking what you wanted and started asking what would keep the peace. The stage became your home, the spotlight your oxygen. But the curtain never closed. There was never a break, never a moment to just be. You learned to smile through pain, to nod through manipulation, to achieve while quietly falling apart. Because if you stopped, the love stopped, the praise vanished, and the silence felt like death. What they didn't teach you was this: love that's earned is not love. It's manipulation wrapped in reward. It's a leash made of compliments. And the tragedy is, even now as an adult, you're still performing at work, in relationships, in social media posts. You're still chasing the high of validation, hoping someone, somewhere will say, you're finally enough. But let me tell you something, you're not a show. You're not a stage act. You were never meant to live for applause, because applause fades, but identity, that's eternal. The day you stop performing is the day you start living, and that shift isn't easy. It's terrifying, because when you've built your life around being what others want, the question, who am I really, feels like staring into a void. You'll feel lost at first, confused, exposed. The masks you wore were comfortable, even if they suffocated you. But that discomfort, that's growth. That's you learning to exist without begging for permission. That's you breathing without earning every inhale. That's you stepping into your own identity, not the one that was choreographed for you. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't have to be successful to be loved. You don't have to have it all together to belong. You can be messy, flawed, confused, and still be deserving of connection. Real connection, the kind that doesn't depend on your productivity, but on your presence. When you drop the performance, something powerful happens. The right people show up. Not the ones who loved the character you played, but the ones who love the real, raw, unfiltered you. That's scary, but that's also freedom. Because when you're loved for your truth, you can finally rest. You can finally exhale. Let's be real. Some people won't clap when you stop performing. That's okay. Let them sit in silence. You're not here to entertain. You're here to live. The stage you built, burn it down. The script you followed, rip it up. The costume you wore, take it off and stand there, fully you. Naked in truth. That's the beginning of everything. You were taught to measure your worth in applause. But your worth isn't in the noise. It's in the stillness. It's in the quiet moments where you don't have to prove anything. It's in the decisions you make just for you. That's where real self-worth is born, not in the spotlight, but in the silence after the show. And here's the final truth. You were enough even when they didn't clap. You were enough when you were just a kid wanting love. You are enough now, not because of what you do, but because of who you are, and no one has the right to put conditions on your value again. You're not a performer anymore. You're a warrior reclaiming your soul. The inner critic, the narcissist you inherited inside your mind, there's a voice in your head. You know the one that whispers you're not good enough. The one that tells you you'll mess this up. You always do. That voice that tears you apart when you make a mistake, when you dare to dream, when you try to love yourself. That voice didn't come from nowhere. It was installed, brick by brutal brick, by the narcissist who raised you. You were trained to doubt yourself, conditioned to criticize yourself before anyone else could. Because if you beat yourself up first, maybe you could avoid the storm. Maybe if you were hard enough on yourself, you could stay in control. That's the lie they sold you, that if you were tougher, more perfect, more obedient, they wouldn't hurt you. So you became your own abuser, thinking it would keep you safe. Let's be clear, the inner critic is not your intuition. It's not wisdom, it's not truth, it's a ghost, a haunting echo of someone else's brokenness that you mistook for your identity. You internalized their voice so deeply that now it feels like it's yours. But it's not, it's theirs, and it's time to evict that voice from your soul. That inner critic tells you you're too much or not enough, too emotional, too sensitive, too slow, too loud, too quiet. It's a trap with no exit. A maze with no center. You keep trying to find the perfect version of yourself that the voice will finally approve of, but that approval never comes, because it was never about you. It was always about control. You may wonder why it's so hard to love yourself, why affirmations feel fake, why self-care feels like a lie. It's because every act of self-love goes to war with that inner critic. Every kind word you say to yourself triggers a silent civil war. That war is real, and you have to win it, not with more punishment, but with relentless compassion. The voice that says you're worthless was installed by someone who needed you to believe it, so they could stay in power. But now you hold the power, you don't have to believe it anymore, and that doesn't mean silencing it with fake positivity. It means challenging it with truth, real truth, the kind that rewires your soul. Every time that voice rises up, you get to ask, who does this sound like? Because it's not the real you. The real you is the one asking the question, the one who wants to be free, the one who feels that fire deep inside, saying, there has to be more than this. That voice. That's your truth. That's your comeback story waiting to be written. You were trained to think that being hard on yourself was noble, that it made you stronger. But what if it's been breaking you this whole time? What if the key to your power is not another layer of discipline, but the permission to rest, to feel, to be imperfect and still be worthy? Healing the inner critic isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily battle. A moment-by-moment choice to speak life where death once reigned, to talk to yourself like someone you love, to treat yourself not as a project, but as a person's. Guard, yes, but sacred. That's where true healing begins. You're not weak because you have that voice. You're strong because you've survived it this long. But now it's time to stop surviving and start living. And that starts when you speak louder than that voice. When you choose love over judgment, truth over fear, power over shame, you are not broken because you hear that voice. You are brave because you're questioning it. You are powerful because you're no longer obeying it. That is how transformation begins. Not when the voice disappears, but when it no longer controls your steps. You were never meant to be your own jailer. You were meant to be your own liberator, and that starts now. With every choice, every affirmation, every refusal to repeat the lies that were never yours to begin with, because the inner critic isn't the real you. It's the residue of your past and your future. It belongs to the real you, the bold, raw, beautifully imperfect soul who's finally ready to live free. From survivor to soul. Warrior, your story is not over. You've walked through fire. Not metaphorically, literally. The fire of manipulation, the fire of emotional abandonment, the fire of being raised by someone who was supposed to protect you, but instead programmed you to doubt your very existence, and yet, here you are. Still standing, still breathing, still searching for light in a world that tried to bury yours. This journey we just walked through, it wasn't just information. It was reclamation. A reclaiming of every piece of you that got stolen, silenced, shattered. We named the invisible, we gave language to the pain. We exposed the patterns, and in doing so, we shined light on the lie that said you were too damaged to heal. Because now you know, you are not broken. You were wounded, and there's a massive difference. Wounds heal, scars toughen, souls rise, and you're not just rising, you're roaring. The child raised by a narcissist learns to survive, but you don't have to stay in survival mode anymore. You don't have to keep checking the emotional temperature of every room. You don't have to beg for crumbs of love that should have been poured into your spirit without condition. You don't have to perform. You don't have to self-destruct. You don't have to silence your truth just to make someone else comfortable. Because this is your life now, your timeline, your truth, your power. There may still be days when the past echoes, when the old pain creeps in, when the voice of the inner critic tries to pull you back into that toxic dance. But now you've got the tools, you've got the truth, you've got awareness. And awareness is a weapon. It's how the cycle ends, it's how the curse breaks. You were forged in chaos, but that chaos didn't destroy you. It designed you. It designed your resilience, your intuition, your empathy, your unmatched ability to feel deeply in a world that tells people to numb out. That sensitivity they mocked, that's your superpower, and now you get to wield it. Not as a victim, but as a soul warrior. It's time to rewrite the script, the one where you're not the broken one, not the black sheep, not the failure, but the trailblazer, the chain breaker, the one who rises, not in spite of the fire, but because of it. So here's your final challenge. Take this awareness and use it, speak it, live it. Let your healing be loud, let your boundaries be fierce, let yourself, love be non-negotiable, and let the world see what happens when a soul finally decides to take its power back. You are no longer just the child of a narcissist. You are the author of a new story, a legacy of truth, freedom, and fierce, unshakable worth. And that story, it starts now. Let's go.